On Monday that you had cooperated fully with Attorney General Andrew Cuomo's investigation when you were aware that two of your top aides had refused to testify, but we were not.
Well, his report had been issued, made it clear who had testified. Those individuals provided when they were requested to testify, with the request went back to them, would you take a sworn statement? And they did. The investigation was closed, and I'm not going to quibble with...
Your description of the facts do not jive with what Andrew Cuomo, the Attorney General, has said, and certainly as a former Attorney General, you would, I would think, be concerned about that. He says your aides never agreed to be interviewed, and it was unacceptable to the Attorney General's office that on Sunday they submit sworn statements that were never solicited in response to questions that were never asked.
I'm not going to get into the
Why not?
back and forth.
I mean, was that appropriate for your aides to refuse to be interviewed by the Attorney General's office? Do you consider that to be appropriate?
Fred, as I said on Monday, and I've answered all the questions.
You did not answer that question.
Answered all the questions over the course of these few days, fully and completely.
You haven't.
To the facts.
If you were Attorney General, would you accept that as an answer? Let me ask the question again, and I'll stop talking. Let me ask the question again. Was it appropriate for your top aides, including your secretary, to refuse to answer questions under oath from the Office of the Attorney General? Was that appropriate or was it not?
Fred, the request that came in was for information from them.
No, it was for interviews.
Fred, if you could please calm down for a moment.
I will.
The request was that they provide information. I was not the one involved in the back and forth with the Attorney General's office. As you can imagine, they were asked for information. They provided it in sworn statements.
In retrospect, should they have answered?
The Attorney General's office closed the investigation with a finding unambiguous that has been eminently clear from the very first, when it was issued Monday morning, that there was absolutely no violation of law.
Should Richard Baum have answered the questions? In retrospect, should he have answered? In your view, as governor, he works for you. Would it have been appropriate for him to answer?
Fred, please, that is sufficient. You said
you won't answer. Okay.
Governor, as a former...
Let me make it very clear.
You didn't answer the question.
The Attorney General's office received the information, closed the investigation.
No, that is not what the Attorney General's office said. They said your aides did not cooperate, and they rejected their statements and did not incorporate them in their report.
We can do the questioning. We can do the questioning later.
Governor, as a former prosecutor, would you be satisfied that that's a thorough investigation?
You guys, one at a time, please.
Would subpoena you to testify before one of their committees. He also mentioned that the Assembly might want to investigate you. Would you cooperate with those?
We have not gotten there. My office put out a statement yesterday that was very clear, and the statement says, with a very direct statement, it is unnecessary at this point in time. The Attorney General's office has put out a report that Senator Bruno called thorough and complete, dealt with all of these issues. Monday morning, I stood here, accepted those conclusions, acted based upon it, imposed very tough sanctions upon the two individuals whom the Attorney General's office suggested sanctions be imposed upon. That is despite the fact that there were no violations of law.
Governor,
that is why we've acted appropriately. My view is that it is now time to move on to the business of the people. We have much to do. The legislature will be here today passing legislation, we hope. That is important. That is what we should be now moving on.
Governor, as a former prosecutor, would you be satisfied with an investigation that failed to talk to two of the principals involved in what you're investigating?
Let me be very clear. I've said from the very beginning, I will not second guess what the current Attorney General has done. He closed the investigation. They are the ones who determined with absolute certainty there was no violation of law anywhere, anyhow, and that was the conclusion. As a prosecutor, I will tell you, you pursue facts until it is your conclusion, unquestioned, that you have reached the legal determination that needs to be made.
One at a time, please.
Questions coming to go around there, like Fred is asking. I think all of us have the same question. Then does that give some legitimacy to the demands by Senator Bruno and others for more of an investigation? Because the questions are not answered.
No, because the issue that was before the Attorney General was whether there was a violation of law. He has said there was not. We provided on a voluntary basis an enormous amount of information in terms of individuals, in terms of documents. That was turned over to the Attorney General's office. They then determined that there was no violation of law, and hence there was no need for further inquiry, and that is where we went.
Do you have any understanding how bad it looks on you? Two of your top aides did not testify.
Well, that is why I have been here every day answering questions. Mr. Baum has been answering questions. I have answered all the questions that have been asked of me without hesitancy, without any concern about the need to be forthright with you, and I've done that over the course of the three days, I suppose it is. We'll continue to do it. I think we've now exhausted all the questions that you have asked of me, but I will continue to be open and available to folks to make sure that. And so,
one at a time. Let's have a little bit of
go to the board, come on in. And Mr. Baum has answered questions as well. He has made himself available. He has been, look, I'm not going to set his schedule, but he has been made available to a range of media outlets in sequence. If you call Christine, I'm sure that can be arranged, and he has done it forthrightly.
So why wasn't he available to the Attorney General? Why wouldn't he answer questions under oath? What's the explanation for that, Governor?
Fred.
And was it on the advice of counsel in your agency, in the executive chamber? Was he advised not to do it?
Fred, as I've said very clearly, the investigation was one where
he keeps changing the subject. The question is, why didn't he answer the question?
I've answered the question.
Why wouldn't Richard Baum answer the questions when he was asked to do so by the Attorney General?
I was not involved in that. He provided a sworn statement that was sufficient for the Attorney General's office to close its investigation, and that is because the legal determinations were made. Again, we can go over this repeatedly, but that was
your top aide, Rich Bell. There were 2 emails that showed that he may have known something about this. You had defended prior to the investigation the conduct of your administration, and Darren Dock specifically, and Bill Howard and everyone else. So why would you take it on face value then, without giving the AG a chance under sworn testimony to ask Rich Bell questions?
Because he has answered the questions to you. The Attorney General's office reached its conclusion. The Attorney General reached its conclusions and has said without any hesitancy or doubt there were no violations of law. There were judgment errors that were made that were egregious that I fully embraced the conclusions of that report and acted upon. And that is what is appropriate.
Your top aide, Rich Bell, is a cloud hanging over him?
He has provided a sworn statement to the Attorney General's office. He has made himself accessible for questioning to the media. He has made himself accessible, and he will continue to do so, and that is what we are doing. Yes, Mark.
Last question, and then we'll take more later.
The Senate today says that it intends to go ahead with an investigation. They're already asking the Attorney General's office with emails and other documents that were created during the course of the investigation. Are you going to cooperate with that investigation if they subpoena you?
I have no idea. I've not heard anything about what they have done or haven't done, and so we will have to wait and see, nor have I thought about this. As far as I'm concerned, it's still a hypothetical issue, which we'll confront. I have been totally open with everybody, every media outlet, every question that has come to me about these facts. That has always been my practice, and we have cooperated. I've cooperated with you in an effort to make sure that that is the case. I've answered all your questions about my knowledge, what I knew, what I did. My perspective is that it is now time to move on to the people's business. It is time to visit the issue of congestion pricing, WICS reform, the fundamental issues that the public should care about. The Attorney General has concluded without any hesitancy that there was no violation of law. There were judgment errors. Individuals have been sanctioned severely for those judgment errors. Now let's get on to the business at hand.
Thank you all.
The AG's office is adamant that they didn't have subpoena power. Can you explain to the former AG why they wouldn't have subpoena power? Couldn't some grounds have been found against them?
Look, again, I will not challenge their legal conclusions, but I think that point is an important one, Danny. They did not have subpoena power. We gave them an enormous volume of information and access to individuals on a voluntary basis. We did not wait to be subpoenaed. We did not wait to challenge their capacity to elicit information. We said, this is an issue, and remember, I requested the IG investigate. This was an investigation that ran. There was not one investigation they ran.
You requested on Bruno, on the helicopters, not on the question of whether your agency was involved in doing something to Senator Bruno. There were 2 different requests. Bruno requested the investigation that came out.
Red, please.
No, was that right or wrong? You've made that claim before. You requested one investigation. Bruno requested another.
The Inspector General's office pursue that.
After the stories
And-
came out on July 5th,
and
after the
we
Post wrote the story.
Cooperated, to the extent that we turned over an enormous range of information and individuals, and hence,
Well, you had to.
are correct, Danny, they did not have subpoena powers, but we gave them an enormous amount of information because we wanted the public to have the confidence that the report that would be issued would be complete, and the Attorney General's office reached its conclusion that it had resolved all of these issues, and hence they closed the inquiry.
Governor, you said you cooperated.
Could the Attorney General have asked you to grant him subpoena power under executive law?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I suppose if I had invoked the capacity to name him as a special prosecutor, that would be conceivable. So I think there would be legal authority pursuant to special prosecutor authority the governor has. Beyond that, I'm not sure if there would be another.
Clear up your answer question.
All right.
Why did you not ask?
Thank you guys so very much. I'll see you soon.